Tulasizwe Simelane on the Morning Brief. Weekdays, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m.
22 minutes after 7. Let's return to a story we touched on Friday because we want to give you another perspective on it. Johannesburg has been named the least walkable city in the world in 2025, finishing dead last in a study of 90 global metros. In a study conducted by Compare the Market, the city scored just 18.38 out of 100, with the lowest safety rating worldwide and only a tiny fraction of residents living near parks or car-free zones. Researchers say most basic errands require a car in the city of Joburg, with just 13% of locals living within walking distance of schools or healthcare facilities. And by comparison, cities like Prague, Vienna and Tokyo are celebrated for walkable streets and accessible public transport. Joburg remains heavily car-dependent and unsafe for pedestrians. Let's speak to Siphelele Ngobese, who is researcher in the Inclusive Cities program at the South African Cities Network. Good morning to you and thank you for your time. Does this tally with your experience and the work that you do around the city of Joburg? And if so, what makes Joburg such an unwalkable city?
So I'll give you the planner's answer. The town planner's answer would be it's the spatial legacy of apartheid, which has been really hard to grapple with and break across our cities. And it's felt in cities like Johannesburg quite acutely, not just in terms of walkability, but, you know, what you alluded to, the fact that not enough people live next to green spaces, not enough people live next to opportunities so that they can be economically active close to where they live. So it's what we call the spatial mismatch between where people live and economic opportunities. So that's just a short answer to that.
Yeah. But just in terms of the safety of walking the streets and crossing the streets, that intersection between motor vehicle traffic, the controls thereof, the walkability of the sidewalks and the likes. What's that balance? What does it bring into the mix over and above proximity to facilities that people may be wanting to reach?
Yes. It's the dominance of car culture that we see in our cities and how deeply ingrained it is. And it's not just about the presence of cars or the overwhelming presence of cars, but it's our own way of thinking around the primacy of the car as the chief or the main road user. So when we think about road user, we don't think about the pedestrian. We don't think about different types of pedestrian. We don't think about universal access, meaning access to, safe, walkable space for people of all stripes, people with disabilities, people who are small, children, women who are with children, etc. So you see quite a lot in South Africa and indeed in Johannesburg, that primacy of the car on the street and our understanding of who road user is as being primarily the car. You see it in behavior. You see it in social perceptions as well. So it would need a change not just in the infrastructure and how our roads are structured, but in our own perceptions as everyday road users, our understanding of what roads represent. They are very much still public space and shared public space and the shared commons.
Yeah.
So it would require a mindset shift.
Tell me about that mindset shift, particularly as it relates to spatial planning and infrastructure planning. I was making the example on Friday of that bridge over the M1 highway from Wynberg into Sandton, which was built. In fact, it's a couple of bridges that seemed to me, at least, to symbolize thinking that says there are people who live on the one side of the highway who work on the other side of the highway who may not necessarily have a vehicle and may want to walk across.
Yes. So in terms of that mindset shift, we would need to really shift into a way of thinking that says enable everyone to be able to use the road. And so in your planning decisions, again, I'm speaking from a planning perspective, how you position bridges. You mentioned bridges over the M1 highway, which are very useful and, facilitate lower road fatalities and greater traffic safety. But even in their design and positioning, they must enable mobility that really links to what people's desires are and what the desire lines are. You find sometimes that from a design and from a planning perspective, us planners as well kind of have a failure to understand what exactly drives mobility, what exactly drives the way people move, where they move and how they move. And so in our planning decisions, in our design decisions, in our infrastructure investment decision-making and calculus, we need to start being very in tune with the why that drives people in the city and what drives mobility around the city, and enable ways of mobility that really are in tune with people's aspirations, what their days are like, where they are, aiming to go. And I would say, in terms of just the design of bridges, also prioritize personal safety, shifting away from bridges where you've got very solid sight lines where you can't see a person walking inside the bridge, which then drives this phenomenon where there's a bridge but people still prefer to cross on the freeway.
All right, let's leave it there for this morning. Thank you for your time and your insights. Siphelele Ngobese is researcher in the Inclusive Cities program at the South African Cities Network.